Good morning. So, I did a couple videos the other day and mentioned some slight problems with the game itself and the way that it was handling rudder control with the Xbox 360 controller, as well as some autopilot issues. There's a number of problems, and I've discovered some with wind as well. I started this video off in my ultra-wide view, so this is the way I view the game across my 3 monitors, and I'll zoom it in here in just a second. So, I dropped the sensitivity pretty far, as you saw in the other video, and this you can see just how much I'm fighting to control the plane, because just a slight movement of the stick and the whole thing goes nuts. So I don't even know if it's actually paying attention to and catching the motion of the sticks. Now, rudder control, as I said, is always on or always off, and you can see just how crazy that gets here, right there. Always on, just a tiny touch, and the whole plane flips out of control. If there's any type of wind, it just compounds the problem and makes it go completely haywire. So that's just a demonstration of what happens to those control surfaces. So I'm not entirely sure if the sensitivity settings are being applied properly. The dead zone doesn't seem to be registering in there, because just again, a slight motion of the stick within that slight dead zone that I showed in the other video, and it still has problems with the plane actually starting to move. That's why you see me making all these little micro adjustments to the plane, because it just keeps bouncing around as the sticks move or adjust in any way. Now, I've run into some similar issues with the wind, where I did a flight around Chicago, and my plane was, I finally got autopilot to do heading control, but in order to hold me on a heading, my plane was always banking at about 20 degrees to the left, no matter what direction I was flying. It was really bizarre, and the wind was really strong too. It was gusting and all going kind of haywire, and I had customized it and deleted the entire wind layer, and it was still there. It's like when I deleted the wind layer, it pulled in live weather instead of keeping it to what I had set in the custom mode. So really bloomin' annoying. But the main thing I wanted to show in here is just kind of some of the issues with the autopilot itself, because that's another big problem. While it's fun to fly around and do kind of everything by hand, that's not really how pilots fly the planes these days. Usually you get to a set altitude and a set heading, you get to your first waypoints, and you kick on autopilot, and you fly with your navigational charts, and you go waypoint to waypoint, and you use those settings to control the airplane. So that's essentially what I'm going to do here. Now, some of the actual controlling is going to be happening off screen. I'll try to get focused on as much of it as I can, but essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn autopilot on. I'm going to lock in heading control and altitude control, and those are the two things that I'm going to have. Now, heading control with this particular airplane seemed to be working for the most part. You can see I make adjustments to the heading at this point, and for the most part things went fairly smoothly until the last few points of getting lined up on the runway. But I could turn the dial to the left and my plane would turn to the left. I could turn my dial to the right and my plane would turn to the right. So heading control made the problems with the flight stick or flight control surfaces much less of a problem, because here I could let the computer handle all of that and I could just enjoy my flight. Now, I'm flying around DFW. I'm heading to Addison Airport, which is the one we just briefly saw right in front of me. It's not a very long flight, just simple. I took off to the south and I'm going to land to the south, so that's about the only real maneuvering that I need to do. There's Love Field down there, and there's Addison right there off to my right. So heading control, you can see the airplane's moving a little bit, but overall it's flying fairly stable and smooth because, well, for some reason things work when the computer's doing it. So what I've got to do is fly up ahead to Lake Dallas, or Lake Lewisville, right up there at the top of my screen there a moment ago, make a right turn and come down into Addison. So not a big deal. Definitely enjoying the scenery, especially from altitude. It looks so good from the right level. And the details on the plane are nice. Alright, so we're coming up on another maneuver here. Now, I feel like I'm a bit too high, so I want to start decreasing some of my altitude. But altitude control doesn't work at all anymore. I was able to set my initial altitude once I got here, and when I pushed the button, it captured what I had, but it won't let me make any adjustments. You can see there I'm trying to decrease it. I can see the altitude setting change on the nav computer in front of me. I could see the blue setting go down. The vertical speed, I made all of these adjustments and nothing really seemed to make it happen. I turned it on, turned it off, tried to make it do stuff, and it just would not capture it for whatever reason. The altitude bug seems to be one that I have in every single aircraft. Now, I was doing a flight around Dubai earlier in a Learjet, and I also tried to fly from DIA to Aspen in Colorado in a, not a Learjet, but a Cessna Citation. And for a moment, I actually had altitude control. I turned the knob to the left, and my plane dropped 1,000 vertical feet, smoothly, stably, and was great. And now it hasn't worked since in any of the 4 airplanes I've tried, which is really annoying. So without that, I essentially have to turn that off and try to carefully fly the plane down. So I'm actually going to attempt that here in just a minute, but I'm going to do it partially manually. So what I'm doing is I'm using the trim controls to angle my plane to go down a little bit. Well, that's kind of why you see me starting to drift down as it bounces around, because using the trim with speed and all of that, it doesn't go very smoothly. But I managed to get it working enough to drop a little bit of altitude. And then my goal was to set the altimeter at the new flight level and have it hold me steady. But that did not work out so well for me. Basically what it does is, and even here with the headings, you can see my plane's going all over the place now. Headings going crazy, my plane's flying up. I'm trying to fight with autopilot on the mouse, while at the same time my left hand on the controller is trying to fight the aircraft to come back into normality. I'm going from overspeed to underspeed to stall all over the place. And I need to make a bank to get into the pattern to come in and land. So autopilot doesn't work at all at this moment. So it screwed up my heading, it screwed up my altitude, everything kind of went nuts. And I'm trying to fight and get heading back at least so that I can set a turn and then try to figure out my altitude. Still fighting with altitude, and it's going to go nuts here again in a minute. And what it's doing is basically taking control of the trim settings and maneuvering the trim to angle the flight surfaces up or down and get them to where they need to go. Hey, we're going nuts again. So I really need to turn the plane around, so I just say screw it, turn and let the plane pull itself around. Again, no rudder control, so this is very shaky. And if you look at my elevator, you can see how far down I'm having to push it just to keep the plane level. And if you see on the very back edge of the elevators, you can see the trim slats were basically full up. The computer had set them to basically 100%, so the elevators were full up when I finally caught it and got control back. And I had to angle full down while on the controller also using Y and the D-pad forward to bring those back down. And it was close. It was pretty crazy. Basically, I'd caught it quick enough that I was able to do it, but it was not pretty. So basically turning altitude control off and trying to fly with heading control and manual flight, it just didn't want to work. So it's really brutal to have these things not function at all properly, and I really hope they get it functioning, because flying is just garbage with a controller right now. And I've seen some posts with some folks who have Xbox One controllers, and the system seems to recognize their controller correctly. So it seems to recognize it with the analog options with the analog options on their system, they were saying they had no problems with rudder control, and I don't know what they're doing differently or what the system registered differently. I have a support ticket open with Microsoft. It's now Saturday morning. I don't think I'm going to hear back until probably Monday or Tuesday from them on it, which is really kind of depressing, but oh well. So I got heading control kind of functioning. I've got my left thumb controlling the drop vertical speed. I'm trying to do it kind of manually here, and now you can see I'm bouncing around with the wind a little bit, and now I'm trying to control the aircraft to bring it in, but because I'm fighting the dead zone that's not there, basically any tiny movement of the stick, so I have a couple millimeters of movement left or right, forward or backward, which I should have in the dead zone so that they are not registering movement, allowing me to control my plane or shift to actually get to the resistive portion of those analog sticks. But those are actually causing movement, so I have to be real quick in cutting over, and then I end up overcompensating and having to go back. At the same time, I'm trying to keep the plane under control with that and the wind layer that's supposed to be deleted. And I'm not paying enough attention to my vertical speed on top of my actual airspeed. And so I came in too slow, I lost too much altitude, and then it just all kind of went haywire. And then finally I had enough of a control to bring it down, but it was a hard landing. And then the plane started drifting off runway, and well, hey, the tail rudder is the way you control your wheel, and it's all or nothing, baby. So full on, and you drift down the runway. So that's basically the flight experience for a lot of us right now with controllers. Now I know, again, a lot of people are flying with joysticks. I have a joystick, I'm sure it would work fine, or a HOTAS, but this is more the comfortable, casual way, and it worked just fine in Flight Simulator 10, or FSX. So hopefully they get that fixed pretty quickly, and hopefully your experience is different than this, but thank you for watching.